Testing, testing. Here we are with another episode of VOX podcast, and we are so blessed to have today with us Greg Lipper, a personal friend, and also he has been an advisor to a startup that I co-founded. Very happy to have you here, Greg, because we know each other for about a couple of years, and
yes,
your startup have evolved quite in an interesting way, and that's why I want to arrange this episode so that we can.
Oh, great! Thank you for having me.
You will be noticed that I'm looking straight, whereas my camera is here because my Zoom is up there and my laptop is down here. So if sometimes look like I'm looking somewhere else, I'm just following the conversation.
I know that problem. The reason I'm not using my own laptop today is because my camera is in the bottom left corner. So the only way I can look at it straightly is by doing this.
Greg, first of all, where are you now?
I am in lovely Del Mar, California.
Lovely. And
which is in North County of San Diego. So between San Diego and Los Angeles, but much closer to San Diego.
Fantastic. And joining us today, Diane from sunny Kenya.
Sunny. It's raining like crazy, actually. But not now, but yeah.
Greg, I want to start introducing you by saying that you have so many talents. When you told me that you are perfectly fluent in Japanese, I couldn't believe that. But you lived in Japan, you got a lot of interesting experience. And I got to know you through your startup, Happi Pte Ltd, which was a service to poll questions to a very targeted and specific audience on a surface level with so many other features. And a few months later, then it became PDC, People Data Company. What happened in between?
Okay, so I should explain that both companies still exist. When we began Happi, it was, and by the way, I should explain that we started this company without one person that had ever worked one day in the market research industry. And so when people say, oh, wow, that's pretty unconventional, well, that's because we didn't know the convention. And so that has been both a great asset and at some points a liability for the company, because everything we do, we're doing without any baggage from the past. We've got our past out of our future, but we've had to learn a few basics along the way. And when we started the company, the idea was very simple, which was, what if market research didn't suck? What if it wasn't a 40-minute ordeal for the participant who begins every interaction with profiling questions about age and income and education and all of these things weren't completely irrelevant to them. I mean, especially when you're dealing with Southeast Asia or Africa or other emerging market nations, the questions that you would ask somebody in a natural conversation are very different than the questions you see on typical consumer surveys. And so we wanted to be able to give people the ability to engage in a fun, free, easy, engaging way, and to support a cause that they care about and potentially win a prize for every 5 questions that they answer. And so the name Happi made sense because it was innocent and sophomoric and light and fun and easy. And also to the clients, it made sense because we weren't saying that this is going to replace deep quantitative or qualitative research, but it's a pulse. It's an easy, fast, inexpensive way to get almost immediate feedback. I mean, we were providing survey results to clients sometimes in less than a day, but never in more than 3 days. And so, instead of waiting 6 weeks to get results, you could get results and then ask more questions and look at those results and then ask more questions. So it was a very a different way to approach it.
So it's a sort of a evolving type of polling. Like you ask the question that you wouldn't ask.
Almost like a conversation between 2 human beings. And so what we called it was one-to-one conversations at scale. Because, if somebody says to you, no, I don't drink this product because I don't like sugar. I'm trying to reduce sugar. Then we would send them down a path of, we would stop the questions to them about that other product. And you can't really do that easily in a survey that is designed from the beginning. I mean, you can if you have 18 different branches, but then even coming up with that takes 6 weeks. And so this became a much more natural flow to a conversation.
Very interesting. Kind of organic polling rather than over-structured without knowing what the answer will be ahead.
Correct. And the other thing is that, once we recruit somebody and we profile them once, we only have to ask those questions once. So about age and family status and income and education and occupation and, how often do you watch TV and, how many hours do you spend on Facebook and, all of those types of questions, so that when we have a question that we want to send out and the client can say, okay, I want people in Jakarta that spend at least 3 hours a month streaming videos, then we can just select that segment from our database and ask the question. And so it's very quick and easy to the participant as well.
And you were sharing with me that you also trigger some questions that are meant to measure the congruence of the answers. So if someone says, if someone contradicts themselves, then you kind of pull them out of the sample or just treat them differently.
So one of the things that we learned through this process is that human beings are very poor conveyors of truth. It's just, everyone lies. We all lie every day for different reasons. And in the market research world, sometimes it's because it's not a lie, but they don't remember. Somebody asks you, Stefano, what did you have for lunch yesterday?
I don't remember.
Yeah, well, but I mean, maybe you had a fabulous lunch yesterday, or maybe it was your first lunch with your daughter in 2 years, and you remember. But in general, the memory does not help. And the other thing about recall is that human memory is actually designed to help the brain support the stories that are important to the brain. Memory isn't really memory. Memory is a collection of stories that confirm for you what you want to believe. And therefore, if you want to believe that you're a healthy person, and somebody asks you, how many days a week do you eat a meal with lots of fat, or whatever it is, the story in your brain is, oh, I'm a healthy person. I don't do that. Maybe 2 or 3 times a week. But if you actually look at what the person eats, there's very little consistency between the truth and the statement. But another reason that people will give inconsistent or untrue answers is as soon as you put an incentive in the equation, it invariably and unavoidably skews behavior. Because if the person was not interested in the incentive, they wouldn't be participating. And so it really doesn't matter what the incentive you offer them is. It could be a chance to win a prize. It could be a donation to a charity that they like. It could be cash. And we have all different models. But some people will give answers because they think that that answer will then give them access to a greater number of questions and therefore a greater incentive opportunity. Other people just want to end it quickly. They just want to get their incentive and be done with it quickly. So they'll answer in ways that are somehow brief.
But as a rookie in the industry, do you think it played in your favor in the long run, the fact that you were not coming from the industry, the fact that you came very fresh and you kind of you could disrupt the system?
It's I'd say it's 70-30. I think that 70% it was to our advantage, especially because we are not only mobile first, we're mobile only. And so everything we did, I mean, the design premise was that this is going to be used by somebody on the back of a bike in Jakarta weaving through traffic. All right. They have to be able to use it with one thumb. There has to be big font. The buttons have to be large. One of the most important things, a mobile survey understands that people start and stop. And so, you know, eventually you get off the bus or you do whatever it is that you were doing, and then you come back later. So it has to enable you to stop whenever you want and restart whenever you want. And surveys that were designed for the computer, for use on the web, usually don't have that. It forces you to continue until the end. And if you don't, then your session times out and you can't go back. So that's just one example. But so because of all of those things, I think that it was helpful to us that we didn't have any head trash. We didn't have anything, oh, well, we've been doing it this way for decades. But there are also some common fundamentals in the market research industry about how things should be designed and analyzed and the terminology that is used that we didn't know in the beginning and we had to learn along the way. Fortunately, we were able to work with both partners and clients that educated us as we went. So I forget what I was responding to before I answered your question there. But anyway, so yes, it was in some ways, it was a hindrance, but I think in more ways it was a benefit to us that we kind of started with a clean slate. But now that we are where we are, the market research knowledge is much more important, and we are bringing that in many ways. So let me go back to the evolution. So in the beginning, the name Happi was fine because it was a fast, easy way for both the client and the participant to participate. As we grew, oh, now I remember, we discovered a few things. And one of them is that human beings are poor conveyors of the truth. And so as you asked in the beginning, yes, we do have a demerit system where we'll ask false positive questions. So, you know, Donald Trump is the first female president of the United States. And if somebody says yes to that, well, either they know something that we don't know or they weren't giving an honest answer. We'll also ask questions like, you know, what were you the first, middle, or last child, or how many siblings did you grow up with? And then we'll ask the same question 6 weeks later. And if the answer is not the same both times, then one of those two times was a lie. We also will do, we're timing the responses. Well, we have our own metric as to what we think is speeding, but we allow the client to determine what they think is speeding. And every 10 seconds, we take an average of the amount of time it took the user to respond to one question. And if they're below, if they're going faster than the speed limit, then they get a demerit. And the way that it works is that when you get 3 demerits, you're on timeout. And every time you get a demerit, there's a little warning that pops up that says you've just gotten a demerit because of XYZ. And when you're on timeout, and we can of course adjust the period, you can't use your compensation. So our internal compensation system is called Smiles. People accumulate Smiles, and then with the Smiles, they can get mobile data or Amazon or Lazada certificates or whatever it is that's relevant in their marketplace. Well, if you're on timeout, you can't use your Smiles. And so there really is a downside to it. But one of the, another place that led us was that surveys on their own are not nearly as valuable as when you combine surveys with observation. So instead of asking people what they do, see what they do, and then ask them questions about that. And that led us into the world of passive metering and other forms of observation. So what passive metering does is it enables us to aggregate data about what people do on their phones. And when I say what people do, I mean what videos you stream, what Instagram stories you're reading, what apps are installed, used, uninstalled.
How did the client? How do your client digest that concept? I mean,
well, hold on, I'll get there. How many, what websites do you go to? Location, where do you go? When your phone is traveling, what speed is it traveling? Which indicates what method of transportation you're using. Literally everything that is done on or to the phone, we can aggregate. And I have to mention a few things here before people freak out. Everybody knows that we're doing this. We make it very clear, and it is a highly conscious opt-in. For somebody to participate in our studies on this level, they have to enable a VPN. They have to give us accessibility rights. They have to give us access to the mic. They have to give us all sorts of different things. And so they know that they're doing it, and we compensate them very generously. We pay $30 US a month. $30 a month in Bangladesh, in Indonesia, in Vietnam, in all of our markets except maybe Singapore, goes a long way towards buying your family's groceries for the month. It's a lot of money. And so we view ourselves not as Darth Vader or Big Brother, but we're Robin Hood. We're giving people a transparent, clear, easy way to monetize the data that others are stealing from them. Because everything that I've just mentioned, other apps, and there's been stories about TikTok lately, but TikTok's not the only one. Other apps grab that data from you and give you no compensation. We're doing it transparently, fairly, and generously.
Diane, one question for Diane. Do you think this one could be an amount interesting for Kenya? $30 a month.
Yes, yeah, $30 a month could pay rent in some places, in like poorer places. So yeah. I can imagine a lot of people would be interested in it.
We have no problem recruiting participants. We have problems keeping some because they don't follow the rules or their phone has problems. But no, I mean, with this level of compensation, and the other thing is that you can go and check us out on Google Play, and you see that we have a 4-star approval, and people are validating, yes, I really did get paid. We have Facebook groups. We have lots of ways where somebody can go and see that, my God, yeah, these people have worked with thousands of panelists, and they're all validating that they actually are getting paid. So the trust, we can get people over the trust hurdle very effectively. So that's one area, the passive metering. I mentioned access to the mic. We use access to the mic not for conversation. We don't record anything. We send to the mic an audio fingerprint of specific advertisements. It could be a shampoo advertisement. It could be a fast food restaurant advertisement, any ad for internet, TV, or radio, as long as it has audio. And we'll send those audio files to the phones. And now the mic is listening for that soundtrack. And it listens in 10-second segments. And when it says, okay, I've identified it, that segment correlates to this sound file. We then time and location stamp when and where that exposure happened. So we know that that mother of 3 people in Ho Chi Minh heard the ad for Tide at 2 p.m. on Tuesday. Now, what did she do? Did she do a search on her phone? Did she, and what did she do over a period of time? Over an hour, 3 hours, 3 days? Did that ad correlate to anything that she did after that? And then for the people that participate in these studies, they take pictures with their phone of specific products that they either buy or consume during the day. And so we're able to create the consumer purchase journey from ad exposure until product purchase, and see across the way what influencers were in that path, what media were in that path, what websites or what social media was in that path. And so that's integrating all of these different elements, right? So we're using surveys and picks and passive metering and audio content recognition. And ultimately, to answer your question, Stefano, what the client gets is the deliverable in two forms. First, they can go to our dashboards and use a very convenient filtering system to see, okay, I'm only interested in people of this profile, or people that heard this ad, or people that heard this ad and used this media. And they can see all of that. Or they can just take the raw data. We provide the data, and we'll add metadata to the images. So, you know, brand, container type, things like that. We have another element of the service where every time that somebody uploads a photo, they'll get an immediate 3 questions. You know, let's say it's a photo of something that they consumed. Okay, did you consume that in the home or out of the home? Were you alone or were you with other people? Did you consume it with a meal or individually? So
I guess the whole world is using Zoom now, despite the fact that there are so many concerns about privacy, as far as I can read. So we got disconnected. I think everyone is having a Friday night party in Asia, and that's why it disconnected. But Greg, you were talking about how you deliver results and value to your clients through the insights that you collect.
So in short, there's 2 options, and clients get both. They get the raw data, including the images and the metadata that we will manually add to each image. And they also get access to our dashboards, where they can do filtering and cross-tabbing and zoom in on exactly the perspective that they're interested in. For better or worse, we began with the consumer. Diane, you might be too young, or the movie might not have been successful enough, but there was a movie once called Field of Dreams, wherein Kevin Costner builds a baseball field in the middle of a corn patch because ghosts whispered in his ear, if you build it, they will come. All right, so that was like the strangest storyline for a movie ever. And somehow we built mentality that if we build it, they will come. And so we went out and we just recruited people to participate in these studies. And then we went out to the clients and said, look at this group of people we have, and they're answering questions. And, you know, the first questions, because we had no clients, came from us. And we were thinking of what we thought brands would find to be interesting questions. So we kind of began on the Field of Dreams premise. And then over time, we were introduced to the realities of cash flow management. And we came to understand that every response costs us money. And we have to stop looking at our platform like a casino and just betting on which questions will bring in client interest. And so now we've kind of evolved to the other end of the spectrum, where we first confirm that we have an anchor client for a specific panel, and then we will go out and recruit that panel. But that brings us to today what I think our most important strategic decision is. All of this technology that I mentioned earlier, the passive metering, the audio content recognition, all of that, none of that is new. It's all been around for 5-7 years, maybe longer. But it has not been widely adopted because of the challenges. And there are so many challenges. First, you have to integrate all of these technologies into a mobile app that also has the ability to do the surveying and the compensation. It has to connect to a reporting platform. But then you have to go out and you have to recruit people. that are of a specific profile and get them to trust you and explain to them what they have to do to their phone to participate. And then you have to, get the clients to understand how they're going to use that data and what business questions that data is going to help them answer. And you do that one time for one client on an ad hoc project, and it's going to cost so much more money than any one client is willing to pay. There are two key words to our model. One of them is continuous. All right, the cost comes in the stopping and the starting. The cost comes in recruiting people, onboarding them, educating them, managing the churn, because if you recruit 5,000 people, probably 1,500 are going to drop out for one reason or another. And so that takes a bit of time to manage and to overcome. But if you ask one client to bear all of the cost, it becomes too costly. So we syndicate, and we have different layers of the offering. One layer is called the core stream, and that is just the passive metering and the location information. And Procter & Gamble, Starbucks, Toyota, and Pepsi may all have interest in that data for different reasons. And so if we syndicate that level of data across multiple clients, they can all get it for much less money. And conversely, we're able to offer the participant a higher incentive. And then on top of that, we put the custom extras. So client A might want us to track these 20 ads. Client B might want us to ask questions of people every time that they went to a certain location. Client C might want us to ask questions to people after they've done 2 hours of video streaming or whatever the activity is. So each client gets their unique value. Each client gets exactly what they want with the variables that they want, but they share the common core stream. And that's what enables us to allocate costs across all the clients. So it brings the price point down significantly for each individual client.
So you have an underpinning layer that is common to everybody and is kind of the ground where anyone can put the seed and then specifically target what they want. I remember we had a conversation once, maybe it was probably one of the first few times that we met, and you were mentioning about the fact that you can collate reports and then you can make a report and sell it to many customers. But at the same time,
Correct.
that report next month is going to be different. And in 2 months again, it's going to be different again. So
yes.
Do you follow the same structure now? You build up this report and then on top of that, you do all the customizations.
Yes. So let me give you an example. Mobile wallets. In any given country, there's anywhere from 5 to 15 commonly used mobile wallets. Well, we can see that. We know what mobile wallets are installed on every phone. We know when they're being used. We understand the transaction contents, and we can use that in a report that will show mobile wallet engagement by time of day, by demographic profile, by geographic profile. But then on top of that, we can ask people questions. So to the 18-year-old males in Manila that used a mobile wallet to make a home delivery purchase, of food or whatever, we can ask them questions. So again, there's the core report, which is the mobile wallet report, but then that gives us the ability to enable clients to ask custom questions to specifically defined segments.
Clear. Diane, you want to jump in?
That's fascinating. Sorry, I'm hearing the voices after it happens, I think. I feel like because of the connection.
That's the way I
so
feel going through life most days. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's a very intricate balance of very intricate balance. I'm sorry, I'm hearing voices that don't align, I think, but yeah, of where you started first with with getting a few clients, rightly or wrongly, sorry, not clients, participants, I should say, and then moved to it. Well, because then you started, I guess, running out of money or incentives, moving towards the clients, and then somehow trying to balance it in such a way that one participant's data and responses are being used by multiple clients, so that you get the value of return there. Yeah, it's fascinating how it requires a lot of balancing. You need enough clients, you need enough participants to get this ship moving forward, I guess. And can you give us some examples of what kinds of I know you mentioned a few already, but what kinds of incentives did you give the participants, and especially the difference when you first started without clients and then later when you now have like a larger client base?
That has evolved greatly over time. We launched the company in Singapore because Singapore was home. I've lived in Singapore for 20 years. That's where we raised the money. And in Singapore, there is a certain passion for the lucky draw, a lottery essentially. And at the end of almost every event in Singapore, there's a lucky draw. And so we rigged the compensation system around that cultural dynamic of, instead of you getting a very small prize, you get a chance in a lucky draw to win a laptop or a mountain bike or a villa weekend or, something very nice. And the lucky draw concept played very well in Singapore. But then when we went beyond Singapore, and from a market research perspective, we had to, because the brands aren't terribly interested in measuring just Singapore. It's too small and it's too diverse. And it's in a region with countries that have, tens, hundreds of millions of people that are very homogeneous. And so when we went to places like the Philippines, Vietnam, Indonesia, Myanmar, what have you, the lucky draw concept didn't play very well there. People would much rather have a guaranteed small reward than a chance at getting a big reward. And so we phased out the lucky draw and we went to a point system where people accumulate points for every days of compliance or every compliant act. So when you keep monitoring on for a day, you get more points. When you answer questions or when you upload pics or when you do whatever it is we want you to do, you get more points, which we call smiles. And you can use those smiles to get things.
Greg, was it you that told me once that in certain countries, mobile data is like gold?
It is gold. It's more valuable than gold. And so mobile data is the prime, except for India, where mobile data now is essentially free. What most of our users will do is use the smiles to buy mobile top-up. And they get the top-up code and they use that code and then they get another 3 gigabyte of data or whatever it is. But it's not just that. It could be a Lazada voucher, or it could be a microfinance loan repayment, which, Stefano, is how you and I began speaking, that people can get their microinsurance or they can pay off their microloans simply by responding to survey questions. And the way that it works on our app is when you pick the reward, you type in the mobile number of who you want to give it to. So you could be doing it for your auntie. It doesn't have to be that you're taking the reward yourself. And so we've converted to that. And now increasingly in many of the countries that we operate, people are saying, just give me cash. And because of all of the peer-to-peer wallets out there, that's now much easier. And so in some cases, we're just funding cash to people's mobile wallet.
Diane, I know you wanted to ask a question also about COVID. Let me ask first a question to Greg about fundraising, because the story is fascinating. And the way Greg's company is doing fundraising, companies, I would say, it's really innovative. And if you can spend a few minutes just to explain why is it so dear to you and how it works.
Sure. Well, let me start off with what you already know, which is in most cases, young companies like ours raise money by selling a percentage of the equity in their company. And that's the way it's been done for decades and decades. And that's just kind of assumed that that's the way to do it. From the investor's perspective, that's not always optimal. Because let's say you have 20% of the equity in a company. When does that turn into cash for you? Well, it turns into money when there's a liquidity event, which means the company's been acquired or there's been a public listing, and in some rare cases through dividends. But normally you have to wait a long time to get your money back, and there's a lot of unpredictable events that have to happen in the right way for it to succeed. And there's a lot of success cases, right? I mean, you know, people that invested early in Facebook or Google or any company like that today are hugely wealthy. But that is less than 1%, less than a tenth of 1% of the investments in private companies. So in our case, and in the case of many companies, the value of the revenue is more predictable and more controllable than the value of the equity. So instead of selling a percentage of our equity, we're selling a percentage of our revenue to investors. And specifically, we're doing a very small round right now because we have an immediate need to fund very large projects from very large clients. And the problem is that these very large clients pay.
All right, great. We're back on. So we had some technical issues with Zoom, and weirdly enough, when Stefano dropped off, I actually have more clarity, and I can actually hear right now. So we're gonna pick this back up where we left off. Greg, go ahead and finish your thought on the questions about your unique investment method.
So, okay, just to recap, what we're offering is a revenue share investment opportunity where the investor receives a 300% return on their investment, which is enabled by us giving 10% of our top line revenue to the investor until they get the 300% return. So because we have this book of business and clients that include the largest brands and agencies in the world, and we have these very large projects that we're implementing, the revenue is much more predictable and will come in much faster than the long-term value of the equity. So we think, at least for a short-term perspective, this is a better way to raise money from the investor's perspective and a better way for us. In the future, we might do an equity round, and one of the benefits to the revenue share investors is that they get the right of first refusal for equity if we ever do sell equity in the company.
Yeah, but you know, with this model, you probably don't have a lot of issues looking for investors, do you? It sounds really appealing.
Well, it's new. And anytime you present something that is new, it's kind of like a deer in the headlights, right? People say, oh, last time not like that one. And they have to go through this whole process. And because we're doing it in the midst of a pandemic where, you know, everybody feels the sky is falling, you know, so we do have headwind in that regard. But yes, I think that ultimately the model will be successful both for us and the investor.
That's brilliant. And I think, you know, I think you're in a unique position to do this because you're just, you know, a few years in, and you seem to be able to do this. You should be generating quite a bit, you know, generating revenues one and generating quite a bit of revenues as well. How'd you get to this point? And you know, on your website there's plenty of big names as well, McDonald's, Unilever and whatnot as clients. Can you tell us a bit about that?
You know, we started the company without a marketing person. We've never really had much of a marketing focus. We've tried a few different things, but really the selling has been old school, knocking on doors, contacting people on LinkedIn, presenting at conferences. Initially, it was very Singapore centric, and Singapore is a wonderful place to sell because so many companies have their regional headquarter in Singapore. You can talk to 7 different companies, on the same day, and you could literally go and see 4 or 5 different companies on the same day. I'm calling you from America now. You can do that in Manhattan, but in larger countries, that is just, it's very difficult to build the momentum. It was easier to build the initial momentum in Singapore, especially because everybody knows everybody. I can point to, so our largest clients today are some of the largest FMCGs, some of the largest advertising agencies, and some of the largest market research agencies in the world. And I can point to the relationship or the event that began every one of those relationships. Not one came through an email marketing campaign. Not one came through digital marketing or a landing page. It was all very old school in terms of personal referrals or just finding somebody on LinkedIn or another source and simply contacting them. And that was an okay way to start, but it's not scalable. And so now we are implementing a more formal marketing and lead generation program. And I think that what I should do at this point is explain that we began with the large enterprises because that's where the budget is. And that's where we can most effectively fund the launching of these panels in these countries. But our long-term goal is not to be large enterprise only. We want to enable small business owners, local business owners to understand, so the people in my town, what apps are they using? Are they using Grab or Food Panda? Are they looking for something on Grab Food and then ordering on Food Panda, or are they going the other way around? We want to be able to offer companies the ability to do this on a very localized, very cost-effective way. But in order to do that, we have to create the footprint. And so working with the large brands is how we're going to create the footprint, create the platform. But long term, we don't want this to be large enterprise only. We want it to be a DIY, kind of like SurveyMonkey, a DIY platform that enables more than just surveying, but it enables the combination of surveying with passive data and observation.
That's amazing. And I can imagine the outcome with a world where marketing is useful, is always directed and is useful. That's amazing. Now, okay, so we don't have so much time left, so let me just wrap up with the last question here. We're in the midst of a pandemic, and you mentioned off recording that it's been good and bad. Tell us how COVID has affected you.
So I was on the phone with a client not too long ago, and the metaphor that he used, he says, Greg, it's as though we were walking through a room and somebody turned off the lights and moved the furniture. That, everything that clients knew about consumers is now unknown. And there's a lot of guessing going on. Well, are people doing more laundry now because they're interested in disinfecting their clothes? Or are they doing less laundry because they're not going out as often? Are they watching, all of the purchase behavior, all of the buying behavior and the mobile activity, all of those things have changed in one way or another. So it's important for clients to understand the current behavior and the impact the current situation has had on attitudes and priorities. And the traditional research methods no longer work. You're not going to be doing face-to-face interviews. You're not going to be doing focus groups. So the mobile research platform has really emerged as currently the only viable way to do fast, economical, and large-scale research. So from that perspective, it's been wonderful for us, and we're having lots of opportunities accelerate, and lots of projects or studies that were formerly done in a different way now converting to mobile very quickly. So that's the positive impact. The negative impact, as I said earlier, we were in the midst of raising capital, and now because of the situation, companies, first of all, have alternative uses of funds. They have to use that money to do some emergency relief in another part of their business. And there's also greater hesitance to assess anything new. And we are a new service doing things in a new way and structuring our financing, our finance offering in a new way. And so that is creating some headwind.
Interesting. There's a whole mix here. You know, okay, Greg, thank you so much for your time and this whole insightful conversation. I feel like it's a very smartly designed business and investment structure as well. Such a pleasure to get to know you and learn about your business.
Well, great. Thanks very much for your time. I enjoyed speaking with you.
Thank you. Bye. Take care.
Thanks.